Well, I tell you, the millenniums, they thought they had, Barbara Walters said, we thought we had the next Messiah. Honestly, the next Messiah, folks. But now they got a severe case of buyer's remorse after he's got, how many Pinocchios? 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 Pinocchios. But young people who voted for the president are now suffering, and his approval rate among them has plummeted.
That's right. The president now has the worst approval rating overall since Nixon. And like other Americans, those millennials who were once his strongest supporters are worried about Obamacare. Ephraim Graham has more.
Just a year into his second term, there is no shortage of opinions on the president's job performance.
His heart's in the right place, but just not good enough.
He needs to just step out there and be more forceful and get the things done.
Obamacare, and it's not, I see what he wants to do, but it's not going along well.
Younger voters were among the president's strongest supporters. Many campaigned hard to get him elected in 2008 and re-elected in 2012. A year later, polls suggest a growing number are suffering from buyer's remorse. When USA Today and the Pew Research Center polled millennials early in 2013, 67% approved of the president's job performance. In that same poll now, just 45% approve.
He's still going to be seen by them as the coolest president ever so far. But they also think of cool as you got to be competent too, and they don't see him that way.
I think his heart's in the right place.
Kendall Crawford is one of those young voters who cast her ballot for Obama in 2008 and 2012. Today, she has a list of disappointments. At the very top, the faltering healthcare reform.
In healthcare, I feel like he could have put a bit more, I guess, maybe just appointed someone and made sure that they got it straight, since it was such an important issue, especially throughout his first term.
Healthcare is the president's signature legislation, and young voters' lack of confidence in it could spell trouble for its future.
Those people were expected to sign up to pay for it. In other words, the young people had to be brought in. They were the ones who would pay for this. And so they're not doing that. They're afraid like everybody else is.
For now, time may be on the side of Republicans who are looking to take control of the Senate.
I think that the implosion of Obamacare and the response of the administration is enough to damage big government without Republicans making a big show of saying we killed the president's signature law. I don't think they need to do that as much as they need to let it die, and then they offer the options people like.
From health care to the IRS Tea Party scandal to the backlash over NSA record collecting, the Washington Post declared President Obama as having the worst year in Washington. Political blogger Chris Cillizza wrote, when historians write the story of Barack Obama's presidency, 2013 will be his lost year. With the shift now in support from young voters, all eyes are on 2014 elections to see what the impact will be. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Thanks, Ephraim. And I might say, before you push a landmark piece of legislation, it wouldn't hurt to read it. And the question is, very seriously, did Obama read the law? And an expert that I had on this program said she doesn't really think so. And I think hardly anybody in Congress read it. As a matter of fact, I would doubt if anybody in Congress read it. But now we've got it, and it's a monstrosity, and albatross is going to be hanged around the necks of those who sponsored it, and that happens to be the Democrats. Well, the national debt is soaring above $17 trillion, but the new Senate budget bill does almost nothing to fix that problem. John Jessup has more of that story from our news bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Pat, the Senate has moved ahead to pass the modest budget deal that's been creating a lot of buzz about newfound bipartisanship. The deal does little to fight America's skyrocketing national debt. Instead, it's supposed to ease the painful mandatory cuts from the sequester. But to do that, the deal cuts back on benefits for U.S. military veterans, and it includes hidden taxes. For example, airline traveler fees will more than double. Heritage Foundation blogger Rob Bluey says Washington calls them fee increases, but for the rest of America, they're tax hikes. And the airline fee increase will not even go to the TSA, but into a general Treasury fund. Republican Senator Tom Coburn says Washington is unable to curb any spending anytime, anywhere. In his annual Wastebook, he points to dozens of examples of outrageous and over-the-top spending. Charlene Israel files this report.
The list of wasteful spending by Washington grows longer and longer each year. The latest report by Senator Tom Coburn highlights hundreds of examples of wasteful and low-priority spending by the federal government. Like the State Department spending $630,000 to attract followers to its Facebook and Twitter accounts. And a study on angry wives. The government spent $300 million to learn that women would find marriage more satisfying if they could calm down faster during arguments with their husbands. How about brothels in Nevada getting $17 million in tax exemptions? The deductions ranging from breast implants to promotional free passes to bring in new customers. In what might be the most outrageous example, the Fort Hood shooter collected $278,000 in military benefits because the Military Code of Justice doesn't allow a soldier to be suspended until they are found guilty.
Inside the Wastebook this year is $30 billion of stupid, what I would consider stupid or at least poor judgment when it comes to spending money in a time when we have very little money to spare.
Coburn says the report speaks volumes about why the American people have lost confidence in the government and why Congress's approval rating is at an all-time low.
We see no waste, cut no waste, and embrace increasing the burden on the American people because we won't do our job. And that's Republican and Democrat alike.
Charlene Israel, CBN News.
Pat, my favorite example was number 11 in Coburn's Wastebook. NASA paid 20 people $18,000 each to lie around all day to see the effects of weightlessness on the body in spaceflight, and they were called pillow knots.
I think getting paid to lie around is a good thing, but I think teaching women how to do pole dancing and with government subsidies is even more important. I mean, women need to understand pole dancing, and wives need to be taught to behave themselves and be sweet to their husbands. $300 million? This whole thing is crazy, but nevertheless, keep in mind, this Wastebook is just a tiny fraction of that monstrosity that's the federal budget. And they haven't even dealt with the major drivers, all the tremendous things that are subsidizing health care and subsidizing unemployment benefits, et cetera, et cetera. These are billions of dollars. But I saw one thing about some, there are vehicles that they've used against IEDs over in Iraq, and they cost about $500,000 a piece, and we're abandoning several thousand of them over there, just leaving them, not even bringing them home. I mean, this kind of thing is just outrageous. But when are the American people going to revolt against it? $17 trillion. Sooner or later, your children and your grandchildren will have to pay for this stuff. And Obama said, we don't have a debt problem. Yes, we do. John?
Pat, a bill recently reintroduced in Congress may do away with Christian and local TV programming. The Next Generation Television Marketplace Act seeks to get rid of must-carry rules that protect free local television. The National Religious Broadcasters Organization is urging Congress not to pass the bill. Dr. Jerry Johnson, president of NRB, said it would be a significant detriment to Christian TV stations and the viewers who rely on them for spiritual guidance. The must-carry regulations were enacted by Congress in 1992 and later upheld by the Supreme Court. Israel faces constant criticism on college campuses around the world, but a new online university hopes to fight back by providing both Jewish and Christian students with a better understanding of the Jewish state. Our Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has the story.
Israel is under siege at American universities and at campuses around the world.
Israel really doesn't meet the requirements of a legitimate state.
Now a course from Jerusalem Online University gives students and others the tools to fight back.
So we're trying to give a perspective on not just the history of the ancient and modern state of Israel, but also on the biblical prophetic connection between the modern Jewish people and the Bible, how the ancient history connects with the modern, where it's going.
The Israel course, the Biblical, Historical, and Modern Perspective, is a 7-part movie course that condenses the history and contribution of the Jewish people.
We're dealing with such a complex situation that people tend to have very little information on. And we know the media can be very, very biased.
Rabbi Ken Spiro, one of the film's creators, says they're taking a holistic approach on politics, religion, and philosophy.
We show in one of our movies, Israel Inside. It's such a dynamic, creative, positive force in history, yet why Israel has been, the Jewish people have been the most hated people in human history.
When people think about Israel, they think about war, or religion, or even falafel.
The Israel Inside course focuses on modern Israel, its advances, and contributions to the world.
But to me, when I think about Israel, I think of the triumph of the human spirit. Israelis, surrounded by enemies, have turned a desert with hardly any natural resources into a flourishing, productive, and caring society.
Spiro presents 2 of the videos.
In recent years, the Jewish people's connection to the land of Israel has become somewhat of a contentious issue. But in fact, every year, more and more archaeology is unearthed that clearly demonstrates the Jewish people's ancient connection to the land of Israel.
One of his favorites is The Edge of History.
And that's about prophecy in the end of days. And the reason I love that material so much is, of everything I present as an educator, it's probably the most condensed. It not only gives the whole sweep of what Jewish history is about, but what it focuses on is current events, what's going on now.
The final class teaches students how to effectively stand up on behalf of Israel.
Every individual has the ability to communicate for Israel, to inspire people about Israel, and to educate people about who Israel really is.
Spiro believes using truth and little-known facts about Israel will help people make their own decisions about Israel and the Jewish people. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
For more of Chris's exclusive reporting from Israel, make sure you check out his blog and weekly show, Jerusalem Dateline. And of course, Pat, people can find both at our website at cbnnews.com. Back to you.
Well, Chris is head of our Jerusalem Bureau, and he does a superb job covering the Middle East for us, and I'm just appreciative. He loves the Lord, loves Israel, and loves this nation.
A big win for the Catholic Archdiocese of New York. A federal judge has ruled Obamacare's contraception mandate cannot be enforced on Catholic organizations. The Roman Catholic Archdiocese, along with various health and educational groups with Catholic affiliations, filed the suit last year. They were challenging the law's provision that says nonprofits must provide contraceptive coverage or authorize a third party to voluntarily provide coverage. The decision says forcing groups to do so violates their religious rights. The Senate has confirmed Jay Johnson as the new head of the Department of Homeland Security. Johnson is a former top Pentagon lawyer. His confirmation comes after Republicans tried to filibuster his nomination. Johnson is the 4th person to lead the Department of Homeland Security since it was created after the 9/11 attacks. About 40% of senior leadership positions within the department are currently vacant. Johnson says filling those posts is among his top priorities. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.